Okay, so get this. Imagine editing the very building blocks of life, like having a word processor for DNA. That's exactly what we're diving into today, this mind-blowing research paper all about Generator, a new tech that could seriously change everything. And don't worry, you don't need a PhD for this deep dive. We'll break it all down for you.
It's definitely a huge leap forward. For a long time, we've been able to read DNA, figuring out the sequence of those letters, but understanding how they actually make the instructions for life.
Huh.
That's been the real head scratcher.
It's like having this giant instruction manual, but it's written in a language you can't quite crack.
Right. And that's where Generator comes in. It uses something called a large language model, or LLM, the same tech behind those AI chatbots that are everywhere now.
Hold up, AI is writing DNA now. That sounds a little too sci-fi even for this show.
It might sound like it, but it's actually based on a pretty simple idea. DNA with its patterns and rules, it's kind of like a language. So if AI can learn to understand and write in human language, why not the language of life?
So Generator is basically learning the grammar of DNA.
You got it. And it's learning from a huge amount of data, billions of DNA letters from tons of different organisms. So it's got this really good grasp of the whole language of life.
Okay, so Generator can read DNA really well. But this paper says it can actually write new DNA sequences too. Is that even possible?
It is, and that's what makes Generator so groundbreaking.
Yeah.
It's not just understanding DNA, it's making new sequences that could actually have real biological effects.
Whoa, that is wild. What kind of stuff can it create? Like designer genes for glow-in-the-dark puppies?
Not quite glow-in-the-dark puppies, but the researchers, they tested if Generator could create DNA that codes for proteins.
Proteins. Those are like the little workhorses of our cells,
Yeah.
right? Doing all the important jobs.
Exactly. And Generator was able to create sequences that, when translated, they produce proteins similar to important families, like histones, which help pack DNA neatly, and cytochrome P450, which helps us metabolize drugs and all sorts of substances.
So it's not just spitting out random DNA gibberish. It's making stuff that could actually work in a living organism.
That's right. And it could also design enhancers.
Enhancers. Those sound like something straight out of a superhero movie.
Well, in a way, they kind of are. Enhancers are like the volume knobs for our genes. They control how much a gene is expressed or turned on, and Generator was able to design these enhancers with really specific activity profiles.
Wait, so does that mean we could actually control how much of a certain gene is expressed? Like turning the volume up or down on specific traits?
That's the idea. It's like having a fine-tuned control panel for our genes.
Okay, now this is where things get really interesting, but also a little mind-blowing. We're talking about maybe customizing DNA for specific purposes. What does that even look like in the real world?
That's the exciting part. Think about drug discovery. Imagine designing drugs from scratch, tailored to target specific diseases based on your own genetic makeup.
So personalized medicine, but on a whole new level.
Exactly, and that's just one possibility. What about bioengineering? We could engineer bacteria to break down pollution or create sustainable biofuels.
Hold on. So we're talking about using DNA as a tool to solve some of the biggest problems facing the planet.
Exactly. And don't forget about gene therapy Generator could help design more efficient and targeted ways to deliver therapeutic genes, potentially curing genetic disorders that were basically untreatable before.
Whoa, that's heavy stuff. So from personalized medicine to environmental solutions to gene therapy, this one technology could be a part of it all. We're talking serious game changers here.
Absolutely. But it's important to remember this is still early days. There's tons of research to do before we see these applications in real life.
Right, let's not get ahead of ourselves. But even if it's just a fraction of what it promises, this Generator thing is a pretty huge deal. So how does it actually work? We know it uses LLMs, but what's happening under the hood?
Well, one of the key things that researchers realized is that not all DNA is created equal when you're training an LLM.
What do you mean? Isn't all DNA important?
It is in the big picture. But when you're training a model like Generator, they found that focusing on specific regions of DNA, the parts that are actually doing something important, like coding for proteins or regulating gene expression, worked way better than trying to feed it the entire DNA sequence.
So it's like focusing on the key chapters in a book instead of reading every single word, even the boring parts.
Exactly. They call these important regions gene regions. And what's interesting is they initially thought that the more data they fed Generator, the better it would perform. So they tried training it on a mix of gene regions and non-gene regions, the stuff that doesn't seem to have a clear function yet.
So like reading all the chapters, even the boring ones.
Yes, precisely. But you know what? Generator actually did better when it focused only on those important gene regions. It's like the model was getting distracted by all the extra noise.
It's like trying to learn French by reading a French dictionary cover to cover. You'll get a lot of words, but not much understanding of how to actually use them.
Exactly. And this finding is pretty significant because it challenges a common assumption in AI, which is that more data is always better.
So in the case of DNA, quality trumps quantity.
It seems that way. And it highlights a big difference between DNA and human language. DNA is not as concise as we might think. It's actually full of what seems like randomness and redundancy.
Like those extra chapters that don't really add anything to the plot.
Exactly. And this discovery has big implications for how we develop and train future DNA language models. It tells us that we need to be smarter about the data we feed these powerful algorithms.
It's like choosing a well-curated library over a giant warehouse of random books. So they figured out Generator learns best from those gene regions. But how does it actually break down and process those DNA sequences? It's not like it's sitting down with a good book, right?
Right. It needs a way to tokenize the DNA to break it down into pieces that the model can understand. Think of it like dividing a sentence into words.
Okay, makes sense. So how does Generator do that? Does it just look at each DNA letter one by one?
That's one way, but they found a method called K-mers worked better.
K-mers? Is that like those delicious little square donuts?
Tempting, but not quite. K-mers are short sequences of DNA letters. And they found that using 6 mers, or sequences of 6 letters, was the sweet spot for Generator.
6 seems so specific. Why 6?
They tried different lengths, but 6 turned out to be the best balance. It let the model capture enough info without getting bogged down in too much detail.
Interesting. So they're breaking down the DNA into these 6-letter chunks, but then how does Generator actually learn from them? Does it get like a gold star for every correct sequence?
Not quite gold stars, but it uses a technique called next token prediction, or NTP. It's kind of like those guess the next word games.
Oh, like when your phone tries to predict what you're typing next?
Exactly. You feed Generator part of a DNA sequence, and it tries to predict the next letter, then the next, and so on. It learns by making mistakes and adjusting based on the right answers.
So it's constantly learning and improving just like we do?
Yes, exactly. It's all about trial and error. And the researchers used a few tricks to speed things up and make the training process more efficient. They use things like flash attention, which helps process those long DNA sequences quicker, and a zero redundancy optimizer to reduce the amount of computing power needed.
Sounds like they really pulled out all the stops to make this thing learn as well as possible.
They did. And the result is this model that can understand DNA, but also generate new sequences that could actually work. It's a pretty amazing feat of bioengineering.
Okay, so we've covered a lot here. Generator is basically an AI that can read and write DNA like a pro, and it does it by breaking down DNA into these little 6-letter chunks and then playing a guess the next letter game until it gets really good at it. But how do we actually know this thing works? Did they put it to the test?
They did. They ran a bunch of benchmark tests, kind of like standardized tests for DNA language models to see how Generator stacked up against the competition.
Time for Generator to show off its skills. What were these tests like?
Well, one set of tests was from a benchmark called nucleotide transformer tasks, which focused on classifying different types of DNA sequences like promoters, enhancers, and splice sites. Think of it like a DNA identification test.
So Generator had to look at a DNA sequence and be like, okay, this is a promoter or this is an enhancer.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And it had to do this for a whole range of organisms, from humans to yeast.
That's a tough test. How'd it do?
It aced it. Generator did better than all the other models, showing it can accurately identify and classify all these different types of DNA sequences.
Score 1 for Generator. But wait, there's more, right?
There is.
Yeah.
They also tested it on a benchmark called Genomic Benchmarks, which focuses mostly on human DNA.
Ah, so a little bit of a home field advantage for some of the other models.
You could say that, but even on human DNA, Generator did really well, proving it can handle the complexities of our own genetic code.
2 for 2. This thing is on a roll. Did they throw anything else at it?
They did. They made their own set of tests called, appropriately enough, Gener tasks. These were designed to really push the limits of what Generator could do, testing its understanding of genomic context across lots of different sequence lengths and organisms.
So like a genomic decathlon testing all its skills.
Exactly. One task was gene classification. Generator had to look at DNA sequences and figure out what type of gene they were, like a DNA librarian sorting books by genre. And again, Generator passed with flying colors.
Go Generator. What else did they test?
Well, they really wanted to push it, so they gave it a really hard task, taxonomic classification. That means it had to analyze much longer DNA sequences, including both gene regions and non-gene regions, and figure out what organism they came from.
Like a DNA detective trying to ID a suspect based on a tiny bit of evidence.
Exactly. And once again, Generator cracked the case, showing it can handle those massive DNA sequences and get useful information from them.
It's like a superpowered DNA detective.
Indeed. It's clear from these tests that Generator is a real force to be reckoned with in the world of DNA language models.
So it's smart, it's efficient, and it can handle some seriously complex DNA challenges. But the big question is, can it take all this computing power and actually do something with it in the real world? That's what we'll get into in the next part of our deep dive.
Stay tuned. We'll be diving into how Generator could totally revolutionize fields like drug discovery, bioengineering, and gene therapy. It's going to be good.
All right, see you then.
Welcome back to our deep dive.
Yeah, it's like Generator graduated top of its class at DNA University. But those were just tests. Now I want to know, how can this like DNA whiz kid actually help us out here in the real world?
Well, let's start with something I think we can all relate to, medicine. Imagine a world where drugs are designed specifically for you based on your unique DNA.
Like custom-made medicine. Sign me up.
That's the promise of personalized medicine, and Generator could be a huge part of making it actually happen. It could help researchers figure out how different molecules interact with DNA, leading to more effective treatments with way fewer side effects.
So instead of taking a drug that like might work for some people but not others, we could have treatments that are tailored to our own individual DNA. That would be incredible.
It really would be revolutionary. And it's not just about treating diseases we already know about. Generator could also help us discover brand new drugs by identifying promising targets in our DNA.
Like finding buried treasure in our genetic code.
Exactly. Generator could help us unlock those secrets and use that knowledge to develop treatments for diseases we haven't even figured out how to treat yet.
Okay, I'm officially blown away. This is starting to sound like the future of medicine is literally written in our DNA.
It is. And it's not just about humans. Either Generator could have a huge impact on the world around us. Think about bioengineering.
Bioengineering. Isn't that like creating glow-in-the-dark plants and stuff?
Well, it can be that, but it's also about using living organisms to solve real-world problems. Generator could help us engineer bacteria that can clean up pollution, produce sustainable biofuels, or even create new materials with totally unique properties.
So we're talking about using DNA as a building block to create solutions for like some of the biggest challenges facing our planet.
Precisely. Generator could help us harness the power of biology to address issues like climate change, resource scarcity, and even food production.
This is getting more sci-fi by the minute, but in a good way. It sounds like Generator could play a part in changing not just healthcare, but the whole world as we know it.
It really does have that potential. And let's not forget about the potential impact on gene therapy. This field is all about treating genetic disorders by correcting faulty genes, but it's faced a lot of challenges.
Yeah, I've heard about gene therapy, but it always seems like it's just on the horizon, never quite here yet. What are some of the roadblocks?
Well, one of the biggest hurdles is delivering those therapeutic genes to the right cells in the body without causing unwanted side effects. It's like trying to deliver a package to a specific apartment in a huge skyscraper. You got to make sure it gets to the right place without any problems.
But I see it's not just about fixing the gene, it's about getting the fix to the right spot safely and effectively.
Exactly. And that's where Generator could come in. It could help us design way more efficient and targeted gene delivery systems, like a super precise GPS for genetic medicine.
So we're talking about potentially curing diseases that were once considered incurable. That's
Well,
amazing.
That's the hope. And while there's still a lot of research to be done, Generator gives us a reason to be optimistic about the future of gene therapy and its potential to transform how we treat genetic disorders.
Okay, I'm fully on board the Generator hype train now. This technology sounds seriously revolutionary, but I know you're going to bring me back down to earth here. What about the ethical implications? We were talking about messing with the building blocks of life after all.
You're absolutely right. It would be irresponsible not to consider that. Any technology this powerful has ethical considerations. We can't just focus on the good stuff without acknowledging the potential risks.
So what are some of the concerns? Is this going to lead to designer babies and genetic inequality?
Those are definitely valid concerns, and they're exactly the questions we need to be asking as this technology keeps developing. We need to have open and honest conversations about the potential for misuse, unintended consequences, and the need for careful regulation.
I agree. We don't want to end up in some kind of dystopian sci-fi movie. We need to make sure this technology is used responsibly and ethically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's not just about preventing misuse either. We also need to think about equity and access. We need to make sure that the benefits of this technology are available to everyone, regardless of their background or how much money they have.
That's a really important point. We don't want this to become another technology that only benefits the privileged few.
Yeah.
We need to make sure everyone has a chance to benefit from these potential advancements.
Right, and that will require a lot of careful consideration and collaboration between scientists, policymakers, ethicists, and the public. We need to all work together to make sure that this technology is developed and used in a way that benefits all of humanity.
This is getting pretty deep.
Mm.
But it's so important to have these conversations to make sure we're thinking about the big picture and not just getting caught up in the excitement of the new tech.
I totally agree. The future of genomics is in our hands, and it's up to all of us to shape it responsibly.
Well said. Now let's zoom back in on Generator itself. You mentioned that it follows the central dogma of molecular biology. Can you remind us what that is and why it's relevant here?
Of course. The central dogma is basically a fundamental rule in biology that describes how genetic information flows. It basically says that DNA is transcribed into RNA, which is then translated into proteins. DNA is like the master plan. RNA is the working copy, and proteins are the builders that carry out the instructions.
Okay, so it's like a recipe book.
Yeah.
DNA is the recipe, RNA is the copy you take into the kitchen, and proteins are the yummy dishes you make.
A delicious analogy. And what's amazing about Generator is that it seems to understand this fundamental rule. It's not just making random DNA sequences, it's creating sequences that can actually be transcribed into RNA and then translated into proteins that could work in a cell.
So Generator's not just a DNA writer, it's a DNA chef.
Mm-hmm.
It knows how to create the right recipes for life.
Exactly. And that's a big deal because it means that Generator is making biologically relevant sequences, not just gibberish. To test this, they looked at two important protein families, histones, which help pack DNA, and cytochrome P450s, which are involved in metabolizing drugs and other substances.
Right, those are some of the proteins Generator was able to create in those early tests.
Exactly. They wanted to see if Generator could not only create the DNA sequences that code for these proteins, but also if the resulting proteins would have the right structure to actually function.
Structure is important for proteins, right?
Yeah.
It's like if you fold a piece of paper the wrong way, it won't make the right origami shape.
Perfect analogy. A protein's structure is crucial to its function. So they use these two powerful tools, AlphaFold and FoldSeq, to analyze the structure of the proteins Generator created. AlphaFold is like a protein origami master. It can predict the 3D structure of a protein based on its amino acid sequence.
So they used AlphaFold to create 3D models of Generator's proteins, and then used FoldSeq to compare those models to real proteins to see if there were any matches.
Exactly. And the results were really impressive. They found lots of examples where the proteins Generator created had structures that were super similar to known functional proteins.
Wait, so Generator created proteins that looked like the real deal, even though they were designed from scratch? That's mind-blowing.
It is. It suggests that Generator isn't just copying what it's seen before. It's learning the underlying rules of protein structure and using that knowledge to create something totally new.
It's like composing an original song that sounds just like a classic hit, same vibe, but different notes. This is huge for protein engineering and drug discovery.
Absolutely. Imagine being able to design completely new proteins with specific functions.
Like a protein that can target a specific type of cancer cell or break down a harmful pollutant.
Precisely. The possibilities are pretty much endless, and Generator is giving us a glimpse into a future where we can harness the power of biology to create solutions we never thought possible.
This is all so fascinating. We've talked about Generator's potential in medicine, bioengineering, and gene therapy, how it follows the central dogma of biology and its ability to generate functional proteins. But you mentioned earlier that it also did really well at something called enhancer design.
Yes, enhancers are those really interesting parts of DNA that act like switches turning genes on or off.
Right, like the control panel for our genes.
Exactly. They're super important in controlling gene expression, which means they determine when, where, and how much a gene is expressed.
So they're kind of like the stage managers of our genetic orchestra, making sure everything runs smoothly.
Great analogy. And what's exciting is that Generator can design enhancers with very specific activity profiles.
So it can create enhancers that will turn genes on or off in a predictable and controlled way.
That's right. It's like being able to program the control panel for our genes.
Wow. What are some potential uses for this?
Well, think about bioengineering. We could use Generator to create crops that are more resistant to disease or drought by fine-tuning the expression of certain genes.
Or to develop therapies that can precisely target and correct genetic defects.
Exactly. The possibilities are really endless.
This is amazing.
Mm.
Seems like Generator could revolutionize so many fields.
It certainly has that potential. But it's important to remember that this is still early days. There's a lot more research to be done before we really see the full impact of this technology.
Right. We need to be excited about the potential, but also realistic about the challenges ahead.
Exactly. And we need to keep having those important conversations about the ethical implications of this technology and make sure it's used responsibly.
Well said. I think our listeners are probably feeling a little overwhelmed by all this information, but in a good way.
It's definitely a lot to take in.
But it's also super exciting to think about all the possibilities that Generator and other DNA language models are opening up.
I couldn't agree more. It's an amazing time to be following the field of genomics.
We've covered a lot today, but there's one more fascinating aspect of Generator that we need to get into: its unique approach to training data.
Oh yeah, that surprising discovery that less can actually be more when it comes to training these powerful AI models.
Exactly. Remember how we talked about Generator preferring to focus on those important gene regions? Well, the researchers made another really interesting finding.
Intriguing. Tell me more.
Well, you know how in AI, it's generally thought that more data is always better. The more data you feed a model, the more it learns and the better it performs.
Right, like giving a student a bigger library, the more books they have, the more knowledge they can gain.
Exactly. But Generator seems to break that rule. The researchers found that it actually does better when it's trained on a smaller, more curated data set, focusing specifically on those gene regions.
So less is more in this case.
It seems so. Remember how we talked about those non-gene regions of DNA, the parts that don't seem to do anything specific yet?
Yeah, those mysterious filler chapters in the Book of Life.
Well, the researchers thought that including those non-gene regions in Generator's training data would give it a wider perspective and improve its overall performance. Like giving the student access to the whole library, even the dusty old books no one ever reads.
Right, but what happened?
Well, they found that Generator actually performed better when it just focused on those key gene regions. It's like the model was getting distracted by all the extra stuff from the non-gene regions and couldn't focus on what was really important.
That's fascinating. It challenges the idea that more data is always better. It suggests that quality matters more than quantity when it comes to training AI, especially in the complex world of genomics.
And it shows a key difference between DNA and human language. DNA is not as concise and efficient as we might think. It's full of what seems like randomness and redundancy.
Like a novel with a bunch of subplots and descriptions that don't really add to the main story.
Exactly. And Generator seems to be able to filter out that noise and focus on the important stuff contained in those gene regions.
Like a really good editor who can cut through the clutter and get to the heart of the story.
A genomic Hemingway, maybe?
Maybe. This finding is important for how we develop and train DNA language models in the future. It tells us that we need to be more careful about the data we give these models and focus on quality over quantity.
It's about picking the right books for the library, not just filling it with every book you can find.
Precisely. And this approach could lead to even more powerful and accurate DNA language models down the road.
That's exciting. I can't wait to see what the future holds for this technology. But before we wrap up, I want to go back to something we talked about earlier, the importance of ethics. This technology has the potential to do so much good, but we also need to be aware of the potential risks.
Absolutely. We need to be having open and honest conversations about the ethics of this technology and come up with guidelines to make sure it's used responsibly.
I think that's a great point to leave our listeners with. This technology could change our world, but we need to be thoughtful and responsible about how we develop and use it.
I couldn't agree more. It's a challenge, but it's also a huge opportunity to shape a better future for everyone.
Well said. But before we sign off, there's one more piece of the puzzle we need to explore. Okay, so we're back for the last part of our deep dive into Generator. We've covered so much what it can do, all the ways it can be used. Ethics? It's a lot.
It is, but it all fits together. You know, understanding how Generator actually works helps us see both the amazing potential and the things we got to be careful about.
For sure.
Yeah.
We've been talking about how Generator can design new DNA sequences for specific jobs, almost like a molecular toolbox.
It is a powerful tool, but it also makes you think, if we can actually design DNA, what does that even mean for, like, our understanding of life itself?
That's a huge question.
Yeah.
Are we heading towards a future where we're not just reading the book of life, but actually writing our own chapters?
It's definitely a possibility, and it kind of blurs the lines between what's natural and what we create ourselves. It opens up this whole new world. Some of it's exciting, some of it makes you stop and think.
A future with tons of potential, but also a lot of responsibility.
Mm.
We got to move forward carefully with, wisdom and always remembering how complex life really is.
Very well said. It's not just about science moving forward. It's about our values and how we want to shape the future. It's a journey we need to take together, open-minded and focused on using this tech for good.
And that brings us back to something we've talked about a lot. The ethics generator could be a game changer in so many ways, but we have to be careful and responsible.
Absolutely. We can't just get excited about the benefits. We need to talk about the risks, the potential for misuse, and how to make sure everyone can benefit.
We don't want this to be something that only helps a few people, or even worse, ends up hurting people or the planet.
Right. It's going to take everyone working together, scientists, policymakers, ethicists, and regular people too. The future of genomics is way too important to leave it to just one group.
I think that's a really important message for everyone listening. This isn't just some science thing. It's something that could affect all of our lives.
It is, and it's a chance for everyone to get informed, stay engaged, and be a part of shaping how this technology grows.
So to all of you listening out there, we challenge you.
Mm.
Stay curious, keep learning, and don't be afraid to ask the tough questions about where genomics is headed.
You never know. Maybe one of you listening right now will be the next big innovator using this technology to uncover even more secrets of DNA.
And that's a wrap on our deep dive into Generator. Hope you enjoyed it.
Until next time, keep those brains buzzing and stay curious.